Episode 47, Vintage Basketball Card Collector and Dealer, Jim Doyle. Bonus. Okay, so this is going to be the shortest intro that I've ever done because this podcast recording does go over an hour, and I want to get right to it because I thought it was just such a fantastic recording with someone that I never met or knew about and had no clue what I was getting myself into. That all said, the reason I wanted to cut this quick intro is to say we did have some technical difficulties with respect to some delay in the question and answers, the little bits of data going back and forth. The Wi-Fi signal was maybe not so strong at my guest's abode. So bear with us. I'm not going to edit this or cut anything out. That's just way too hard for me to do. So thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy this. I thought it was just so fantastic. So thank you so much. All right. Welcome to a bonus episode of the podcast, The Card Diary by Hobbyist Thompson. Definitely somewhere in the top 100 of hobby podcasts. I am your host, Denny Cards, the self-proclaimed hobby jack of all trades, master of none. And you could be listening to any podcast in the world right now, but you're here with me. But today, I have a special guest as well. So please allow me to explain how we got here. Okay, so here we go. A couple of weeks back, I hit 6,000 followers on Instagram. Thank you, everyone, for all the support and love. And instead of putting up a really nice card up as a giveaway, like a lot of people do, I decided to do something different because that's how I operate, I guess, sometimes. So I decided to put up a podcast guest spot up for a random drawing. I think about 7 people joined. I knew most of them. And then against all odds, one of the few people I did not know ended up winning. But then I went back to my DMs and I was like, wait a minute, we actually DM'd before. And he actually had a card that I wanted. It was like a Fleer Retro PMG. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we have totally talked before. And then I realized he actually listens to this podcast too. So just double awesome. His for folks who are watching on YouTube, because I do plan on uploading this up on YouTube, his Instagram handle is Doyle_11_cards on Instagram. His bio on Instagram says that his first job was sorting cards at Rotman Collectibles in I gotta get this right, in Worcester. Took a few years off from cards. That's right? It's Worcester.
Worcester, yeah. So Worcester. It's a colloquial pronunciation.
Was not gonna say Worcester for sure. I know Boston a little bit, so the Massachusetts area. He collects vintage wax and old school basketball. He's a collector, and he's also, from when I talked to him, he's also a dealer, which is amazing. So I can't wait to talk to him about this. He's going to be dealing at the Boston Sports Card Show in Wilmington, Massachusetts. He's looks like, based on his Instagram feed, he is going to be selling vintage basketball cards and memorabilia. Bobby Orr signed rookies. I even saw I think it was a type 1 photo of Wilt Chamberlain, and also sealed graded wax from the 80s. I just think it's so awesome. So I wanted to welcome my special guest today, Jim Doyle. Welcome to the pod.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm excited to kind of share some of my insights in the hobby, and hopefully it's informative and educational and have some fun. And so I deal mainly in old basketball, vintage basketball cards with a little bit of old wax packs and boxes, and collected back as a kid, pretty heavily. Worked at a card store and then stopped with cards for about 25 years, and then probably 2 or 3 years ago got back into it pretty seriously. So it's been a fun re-entry, and met a lot of great people and had a lot of fun, built up my personal collection. So it's been enjoyable.
Love to hear it. So, Rotman Collectibles, is it still open, or is it one of those kind of it's gone to wayside?
I think I couldn't quite hear that. I think
Oh,
the
I'm so
internet might have
sorry.
cut out a little on my
Oh
end.
boy. All right.
That's
Hopefully
okay.
this won't be too much of an issue. So here we go. In your bio, it said that your first job in the hobby, or just in general, was sorting cards at Rotman Collectibles in Worcester. So I was wondering, is Rotman Collectibles still available? I mean, is it still open?
Oh, so unfortunately, it did close maybe 15 or 20 years ago. So it was open for many, probably 30 years or so, and then it survived, through the junk wax era, and then
Mhm.
uh, after that, it eventually, before the COVID boom happened again, it is no longer in business, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Okay. And you said you took 25 years off from cards. When in your bio, when it said you took a few years off, I thought it was like maybe like 6 or 7, but you really unplugged for a couple of decades there.
Yes, yeah. So I have have a family now, so that took up a lot of my time. But now they're a little bit older, so I'm able to spend a little more time and energy and resources in back into the hobby.
No, that's awesome. As someone who has a young family, I'm just like I don't even know how or why I do this. People who have even younger kids who are, not even of school age. I'm just like, I don't even know how people do it. But you know what? I think it just means that we love this hobby so much. So, just everyone who's able to make it. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful place, and I know that speaking for myself, like I just feel like it's really invigorated me and allows me to tap into my creative side and my sides that I normally wouldn't get in outside of the hobby. Yeah, I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yes, yeah. It's great for me because I get to meet a lot of interesting people and some characters and a lot of people that share the interest in the hobby. And yeah, met quite a few people that have become friends now. Friends
Hmm.
outside, not just in the cards. And yeah, it's been a certainly enjoyable experience, and yeah, I've certainly never would have guessed I'd be doing podcasts and things like this,
Yeah.
even just a few years ago.
So speaking of, this is not your first podcast. I remember you sent me through DM like a link to a podcast you've been on before. I mean, usually I would have to pay people to plug their podcasts. I'm just kidding. But if you want to tell me, like, how did you feel like? If you want to explain which podcast and when it was, I listened to a good deal of it. I just didn't finish it right before we started recording. But did you want to talk about your first podcast experience and who it was with?
Oh, oh, sure. So it was with his name is Nick Andrews. He's a collector that recently finished collecting the 1986 Fleer autograph set. So he has the entire set autographed. And then once he completed that, he moved on to attempting to finish the 1969 Topps basketball tall boy autograph set, which he's still in the midst of. And he's I forget how many he has left, but it's a challenging set because back in the 60s and 50s, basketball wasn't quite as big as baseball and football, some of the other sports. So and also just even getting cards autographed was very rare. It was almost frowned upon because it was not.
Mm.
It seemed to, some old school collectors would argue that it kind of ruined the value of the card. So there, some of the obscure players from that '69 set, they were not many copies were ever autographed. Probably even fewer survived. And cards, the set has 99 cards, so there's a few that they're pop 1, 2, or 3. Very few copies that he's trying to kind of chase down. So we had met I think we had met just on Instagram, and he was looking actually for a Jerry West rookie card to get autographed. He had a friend that was doing a signing, and so he saw I had a couple on Instagram, and he reached out and ended up buying a West rookie, low grade but nicely centered, and then he just had followed my page and said, oh well, I'm trying to grow this podcast, and we have similar interest in the vintage basketball realm, and he reached out, and it was a lot of fun. He he said he's gotten good feedback on it too, and he's got some pretty good guests. He just had Jeff Wilson, the sports card investor, on last week, I think it was. Said Walt Frazier and wow. A few other decent names, and he's kind of a nice guy. It was fun. So then when I saw your contest, I thought, what the heck, I'll put my name in the hat, so to speak.
Absolutely. I'm glad you won. I gotta say, I've eaten at Walt Frazier's, I forget what it's called, like Wine and Dine. They have like a half court basketball court inside the restaurant. It's in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. We've eaten there a couple of times, buddies and I, who are in a fantasy basketball league back when I used to do that. But just fond memories of that. Man, if you got Walt Frazier, I mean, yeah, sure, Jeff Wilson, big name in the hobby, but to get round ball royalty in there, that's amazing.
Yes.
And you.
Yes. And I think, and he had the other one was Adrian Dantley, and he was just telling funny stories about, people trying to buy his old MVP trophies and such,
wow.
his old jerseys and things like that. So it was kind of funny to hear someone from a different era of basketball. It was very candid in the pod with Nick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I definitely, so we don't go in the same lanes. So I'm modern and ultra modern, but mostly modern, like 90s basketball, and pre-Panini, like early 2000s basketball. But we share the common interest and love of basketball. So you're vintage. I don't even know. Let's talk about this. Where would you say the vintage period ends and modern starts? Because I don't know if it's the same for all sports like basketball, football, baseball. I'm still learning all this too. So when you say you're a vintage collector and dealer of vintage basketball cards, like what era are we talking about?
That's a good question. That's a common question, and I think I'm a little bit biased just because of my age and that when I was collecting. So I tend to think of it as cards from like 88, 89 Fleer, and then back older than that. So maybe 86 Fleer, but is into 87, 88. 88 was the last year that they made relatively limited copies of the Fleer issue. And then more generally, I think of in my collecting genre is more like 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, early 80s, like the Bird Magic rookie. And so it's weird because in basketball they didn't make many sets. So in the baseball you have sets every year in the 50s, and in basketball there's really just there's the 48 Bowman set, then there's the 57 Topps basketball set, and then the 61 Fleer, and then there wasn't an additional set until 69, 70 basketball set. So there's one of the reasons I moved into basketball is I found it a little less overwhelming.
Okay. So you mentioned the 69, it is Topps, right? 69 Topps?
Correct, yeah.
And I think they've done like almost like the retro thing where, like I've seen Jordan, Rodman, and, like 90s players on like almost like that. I think it's like the 69. It kind of has like it's a white background, a solid color that changes, and then almost like I don't know if it's black and white. See, oh man, I should have looked this up before I started this. But what is it about that 1969 set that resonates with you so much?
I think some of it is the color. If it's so, I'll just clarify, because if it's the you might be speaking of the 61 if it has like a color on the top, almost on a rectangle, and it's color on the
That's
bottom.
what it is.
In a
Yes.
rectangle, that's it. Yeah, put so, and that's 61 Fleer. So
Yep. That I'm looking
it
at it now.
resonates because it's very simple. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So it's kind of a very simple, kind of a classic design, but it has just extraordinary players. Yeah, their main rookie cards in that set. So because of I think I might have forgot to mention that when I was listing off the different issues of this basketball series. So there was 48 Bowman, 57 tops, 61 Fleer is probably
Hmm.
one of the most important ones, and then 69 tops.
Yes, you did
So it
say that the
has the
60.
Jerry West rookie.
Sorry to
I
interrupt you, but
apologize.
I no, because I know some people were so angry when they were listening to this, when they were like, I can't believe he said the 69 tops. So the 69 tops you had already mentioned, those were the tall boy cards. Those are the ones where it's a white background, almost like a
Correct.
player making a move, like a nondescript player in the each of the four corners, with like a oval color in the middle, with the player kind of like in a pose or an action shot. The 61 Fleer, that's the one where that it's the rectangular solid color, like you're just mentioning. So thank you so much for clarifying that.
Yes, yes, yeah. I apologize. A little, I guess, a little nervous here too. So,
No, it's me.
but
It's me. It's not you at all. Please, no, you. I'm the one
no,
who's messing up here. You are definitely the expert on vintage basketball. I am merely a spectator, or I mean, I love how these cards look. I do have a couple of vintage cards, like you said, like pre 1988 Fleer. But when I look at these cards, like they look awesome. They just don't. I guess for me, like I watched. My childhood was watching, like the Jordan Bulls, right? Even though I'm living in New York City at the time, I'm just rooting for Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But for you, being a little bit older, I don't know if you want to say how much older, but who are you watching that again, like these cards and sets were resonating with you?
so back in the day it was like the Celtics, so Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, kind of the original. They used to call them the original Big Three before they had the second version of the big three. I have had a few different copies of the Bird Magic rookie card. So that was when I was a kid. That was like the set that one of the first sets I collected on. Unfortunately, the cards had a perforation in them, and being, I don't know, I was 14 years
No,
old or so,
you did.
and I was separated, 16
You
years old. I was
perforated
separated
them.
the cards into individual.
Oh,
I did, unfortunately.
cards were meant to be played
Yeah.
with, right? I mean, it's crazy now to hear and say that, but I mean, maybe that's why they are so rare or so coveted. Is I mean, like just I don't even know what to call it, but like the you enjoyed those cards at that time when you did that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a different time, and yeah, and I had them in a little. I remember having them in a little Ziploc baggie. It was before the time of even little cart top loaders and little
Yeah.
plastic containers. It was, and I may still have it somewhere in a box because it
Oh.
was I kept it for a long time. I don't know if I still have it though after my mom moved
Oh,
out
I,
of her main house.
I hope you do, and that's certainly not something that you're selling. That's I mean, one, it's just yeah, those are your stuff from when you're a kid, right? I mean, and certainly wasn't slabbed, right? I mean, slabbing is such a recent thing. Um, but
Oh yes.
yeah, go ahead. Did I lose you there? Uh-oh. I was
It
trying.
just cut out for a second there.
Oh man. Yeah, I okay, so let's. I apologize for that. So can I ask you? So before, okay, bring us back on track here. You did the fabulous, amazing thing of actually providing almost like a Q&A, like questions you wanted to maybe have asked, and some brief answers that so I could expect maybe what you were going to ask. And thank you for doing that. It's like you were very prepared to do that. Um, so as you're moving around trying to find a better Wi-Fi signal, um, I'll extend for time here a little bit. But thank you so much for providing me that outline of what you wanted to talk about today. So I did want to get to that outline right around here on the 20-minute mark. So if I can ask you the following question, Jim, do you love cards clearly, but you've also recently gotten into dealing, and I wanted to ask you, how long have you been a dealer at shows? And at this point, do you consider yourself a dealer, more of a dealer or more of a collector?
Okay, that's a great question. I did hear all that question. Hopefully,
Yeah, it's
my
a great question
answer is
because
transmitting through the through the Wi-Fi
it's a great
here.
question because you asked me to ask it. So
Yes. Well, because I think as I got back into the hobby, I was only solely a collector, say 3 years ago, and I went to a lot of card shows and met a lot of great people, met a lot of people that were considered dealers, and I realized if I wanted to continue to accumulate cards that were a little bit outside my price range and my affordability based on my job, that I would need to kind of have a little bit of a side gig to trade and sell and make a little bit of money on the side that I primarily just reinvest in more cards. So um, my wife's idea is that my hobby is net neutral. I'm not spending my income on cards, but I'm building my collection mainly by kind of trading and flipping and finding things and making connections with people. So I'm kind of a hybrid, I guess I'd consider myself, and I certainly have a new appreciation for these people that are full-time dealers that are weekend warriors, and they're traveling the country, setting up at shows, and getting hotel rooms, and spending 2 or 3 days on the show floor trying to swing deals and such, and kind of a new appreciation for that. So it's fun, but and I think it's interesting that I think sometimes collectors go to a show and they see these dealers where there's a lot of money exchanged, and they kind of feel like, oh, they just have it easy, they just show up and money falls in their lap. But it takes a lot of effort behind the scenes to kind of make it happen.
absolutely, and I love that answer because that I think for me that's what this whole podcast was about is me trying different things, wearing different hats, shining different lights on shining the light on different aspects of the hobby. And early on, I talked about setting up as a dealer, buying, trading, selling, transacting. And I think as I got to be maybe tapping more into my creative side, I kind of got away from that. And I think I want to get back into that a little bit more. Having said that, I think the more you get to do other things, you hopefully gain an appreciation. Like you said, you gain a new appreciation of people who do it full time. I think I definitely consider myself, like a, part time, almost like a voyeur, almost like someone who is, uh, spectating and then trying to get into the ring or try to be the man in the arena. But people who do it full time, like, kudos to them because, like you said, there's so many implicit costs with travel and like lodging and also time, right? I mean, there's you're taking an entire day, an entire weekend to be immersed, completely immersed in cards in a card show. And so, if you're listening right now and you're one of those folks, like, kudos to you because I'm sure you're doing what you love, but also that's a lot of time that you take away from family and from other obligations, and you do it because you love it, and hopefully you do it because you're good at it too. So, you know, thank you for those who do that, because you know that's half of the equation of a really great card show is the dealers. I feel like I might have lost Jim. He's trying to find the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I know, and
Um,
I. It's funny. Usually, it's only weather related. We have not had any weather issues here, so and I even brought my newer work computer home to try to
oh
avoid this.
man.
So, but we'll try. I guess we'll try to keep plugging. But if it if it gets to be an issue, we can abbreviate it if need be. I'm not
or,
sure the
or try
cause here because
or
it's
try
usually
for a
pretty
different
steady.
evening. Yeah, I don't want to,
Yeah.
you won the giveaway. I want to give you the full attention and time on the recording. But I mean, is this maybe a good time if you can hear me say this? Could you maybe plug the, like you said you wanted to plug the Boston show that you're going to be setting up as a dealer this weekend?
Oh, sure. That would be great. So yeah, so this weekend is it's actually a 3-day show, and it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's in Wilmington, Mass, just outside of Boston, and it's the 36th annual Greater Boston Sports Collectors Card Show. And it was basically started 36 years ago with a bunch of diehard collectors. I think the first meeting was at someone's house, and then the next year they moved it to like a Holiday Inn, and then within a few years it's at this large Shriners Auditorium Convention Center, where it holds I think Mike told me this year there's going to be 350 dealers. So it and I do like it because there's a good mix between the vintage and the modern. As a more primarily vintage collector, a lot of the newer, smaller shows I go to tend to be pretty heavy on the uh, modern side. And so this is maybe 50-50 or 60-40 even. So there's a
Wow.
lot of vintage dealers, and it's unique in that regard too.
Wow, that's really awesome. 50-50. I mean, I feel like this last national, I feel like all I saw was like ultra modern quarterbacks in PSA slabs, and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is just too much. But I'm glad that it's that good of a diverse mix up there. So Friday to Sunday. So for folks who, I don't know when they're listening to this, it may have already passed. November 3rd to November 5th, 2023, right?
Correct. Yep. And it's Friday. I think Friday is like noon to 7, and then Saturday I think like 9 to 5, and um, Sunday is I think 9 to 3 or something like that. But there's a website that if you just Google Greater Boston Sports Card Show, there's a
Okay.
link with they have big guests and autograph guests and the like too.
All right. Well, Nick got a free plug. The Greater Boston show got a free plug. Man, I'm just bleeding dry here with the free plugs. So okay, what lessons? So I want to ask you, what lessons have you learned from being on that other side of the table, the dealer side, the vendor side?
The one thing I've learned is to just always try to treat people with respect and kind of treat them how how you would like to be treated. And I actually the first big show I did it was in the Shriners, the same location in April of last year, and I met a dealer that's a full time dealer next to me, and I was, very open talking to potential customers about cards and such. And he actually told me afterwards that I was being too honest. I was being too nice to the customers
Oh
because
my
I was
goodness.
like telling them, sometimes I would even tell them what I paid for a card and what I was hoping to get for it and such. And so I'm certainly still learning. And
No, no,
it's
sorry, I want
it's
to
a
cut you
learning
off there.
process. I think every show I go to, I learn a little bit more.
Jim, no. Can I just say, I mean, when you say you're learning not to be as transparent as this other dealer wants you to be. I mean, like, I'm sorry. I just, if you, you do you, and, do what you think is best. But when you say, that you're possibly going to not, I mean, look, everyone has to do what they need to, like, make money in the hobby and whatever. But I mean, I think in order to create those long-term relationships, like, kudos for you for being transparent. I mean, there are definitely some people I know who don't want to say how much they got, a card for, because they don't want to, like, because they want to flip it for a lot more. But for you to say that you're actually too open and transparent, like, no, please, we need more of that. That person needs to learn,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes. Well, no, I think, that's how I feel too. And I mean, I have a little more of a long-term, view of things, that I think if I, maybe give someone a decent price or a good deal, then maybe someday, down the line, if they're going to sell a card or something, they might, maybe they come to me and sell it to me, and, maybe it pays off in the long run. And it definitely has already for me, in terms of building relationships and such. And there was a gentleman I met at the April show. He does, Eric's his name. He does primarily tickets and such. And a mutual friend introduced us. We had kind of a nice conversation and such. And after the national, I was in the national at the show, and he had found out about a kind of a rare set that a friend of his was going to be selling, and he ended up kind of putting a word in for me and connecting me, and allowed me to kind of get this fairly rare 55 All-American club set. So it was a way of building relationships and such. So it was kind of felt like my openness and honesty has already started to pay off a little bit. So
Long-term view, I hope people really get that. There's so much when you see a lot of, and I know I'm in the Instagram social media world and I'm making content, but I don't make as much content about, like, flipping and transacting, because when you see it in a 90-second reel, nothing against the people who do it, but they just show really quick cuts of, a deal, and it's like, that's just not how people actually talk. That's not how people actually transact. Maybe some people do, right? And I don't know, maybe it is more of the ultra modern cards that are flipped that people talk in that way. But like what you just said, like, just building relationships, talking to people, networking. You said this was at the national, and it got you this what you said is 1955 All American Sports Club uncut sheet. Like, that's sounds really rare to me. Like, you can only get that through building relationships, I think.
yes, yeah, no, it was lucky. I mean, it was a kind of a weird regional set that was made in '55. That you basically PSA grades them, but you hand cut them. They're issued in a sheet, and there's superstars of the day. So there's a Bill Russell card, there's a George Mikan, Mickey Mantle, Jackie Robinson. So
What?
and this. I had gotten one set from Heritage, and then this gentleman just had happenstance to know someone, and then while I was at the national, I ended up I bought so in the long story is I bought these two sets, and then proceeded to sell them to two different people that I had met in Chicago at the national. So it's it was my first time going, and I felt like I kind of got lucky and kind of sort of hit a home run, and yeah, and ended up meeting a gentleman from Massachusetts that I'm trying to work out kind of a consignment situation, and he's given me some stuff for the show this weekend, and we were hoping to do some more down the line. So it's yeah, and I funny because I've had some people that are like, "Oh, don't bother! It's so crazy. Chicago's so busy. You'll be a little fish in a big sea, and don't do it." And I just said, you know what the heck? I roll the dice, and yeah, and my buddy Josh, he's a big non-sport guy. He came with me, and he, the two of us kind of learned a lot in 4 days, just kind of thrown into the fire, so to speak. So.
I mean, if this was your first national, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was mine too. I mean, the first actual one I was in was 2012 in Baltimore, and then I took a 10 year break. But thrown into the fire, that's a really good way to describe. I feel like that was my experience too. I just really went wherever the wind took me. I feel like there's so much to do, but I did. I mean, I keep joking about how I only saw ultramodern football in PSA slabs, but I mean, there was definitely this other area of the national, and definitely a diverse. When you get that many dealers, you're going to have all sorts of cards. But I did. I mean, maybe I walked away from the vendors that had kind of. I don't say this in a disrespectful way, but like almost like a flea market type of atmosphere. Like they just had a lot of wax just piled on each other, and it just didn't seem as organized, like showcases of, like, again, just slabs upon slabs. But would you say that that's kind of like where you're more comfortable with, like the dealers that have like maybe setups that are kind of like more traditional looking?
To be honest, when I was walking around, I kind of tried to focus on cases that had some more of the vintage material in it, but it was overwhelming too, because I was set up at a table, so we were kind of set up as dealers. We kind of sub rented a space, and but it was kind of tough, because being a more, like the collector in me wanted to just spend the whole whole weekend just looking
Oh,
and digging for the next treasure. So it was kind of it was a challenge, but I guess I just looked and tried to find people that had cases that had the older the older cards in it, whether raw or graded. And
got it.
yeah.
So I
And yeah,
apologize.
the other thing I'll say.
Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead. I can hear you now, I think.
Okay, sorry. I want to hear what you were about to say. If you could just put one, if you allow me just 1 second to say this. I totally thought when you said you went to the national that you went as a member of the public. You went to the national this year to set up as a dealer.
Yes, yeah. So it was
Oh,
it was a little crazy. The way the whole thing came, it was pretty crazy. So I had booked an airplane ticket to go to the national to just shop and experience it. I had never been. And on Facebook, there was a gentleman that had two booths, and that his partner backed out on him, and he kind of let us use a portion of one of his booths. And I won't, say who it was, because I think legally they're not supposed to
no,
sub-rent
yeah,
the
yeah, hush,
spaces
hush.
and such.
Right,
But
right.
anyhow, it was so we had this, so I luckily had another good friend that I've come to know, that's a Massachusetts dealer, that was driving his showcases out with a van, and he offered to drive my cases out, and saved me a lot of money renting cases. And
Yeah,
he is the type of guy that just, I wanted to buy him lunch, I wanted to buy him dinner, I wanted to do something.
yeah.
He refused. The only thing he said to me was, someday, if you come upon a collection that you can't work with, or it's not your
Mm,
forte, just pass the lead on to me. And he said, what goes around comes around. We take care of the good people. And so yeah, so we ended up. I only had already had flights from Tuesday to Saturday, so I didn't really get to stay through Saturday, all of Saturday and Sunday. So it was, um, man, just wild. I mean, I met, actually, some of my bigger sales were to a big Celtics fan from Australia. It was
oh,
just,
awesome.
just crazy that it turns out to be a big Bob Cousy fan and a big Bill Russell fan. And he, I was just sitting there, and he's shooting the breeze, of course, with his accent and everything.
Yeah.
And he's buying, these cards from me. It was,
yeah, gentleman from California, a couple of guys, a real nice guy from Canada. I mean, it was, and then the one guy that, the gentleman that we might work together was, turns out we're in Chicago, but he went to Holy Cross. So my college where I work now, I was an alum there. He happened to be an alum there, and so, oh, you go to Holy Cross, and it kind of led to, oh, that's so funny, small world. And then I'm supposed to meet him at the show on one of the Saturday or Sundays. He's supposed to come up, so we'll see. So it's wild, small world stuff. And then one of those 55 sets I ended up selling to him. So it kind of helped, hopefully if I kind of worked a good deal for him, hopefully it'll kind of, I can maybe help him sell some of the extra stuff that he has. So we'll see. But the bottom line is just a lot of fun. It's kind of exciting, and looking forward to the weekend, mainly meeting new people and, strengthening existing kind of relationships, and, hopefully developing some new ones. So
I wonder how an Australian person says Worcester. It's like I can't even get the Australian accent down right now, but or ever. No, but that's really interesting. I mean, you just said a lot there that I love. It was such an international. I mean, kudos. I met a good amount of Australian people from other countries, especially Korea and Australia, and I'm like, man, to get to the national. I mean, talk about travel costs and lodging and all that. I mean, and it's just so much time, jet lag, and all that. I mean, that's just fantastic. So you actually dealt at the national, and you were never at the national before. So you really were thrown into the fire. You were just like completely. I mean, wow. I don't even have words. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's just amazing.
No, no, I know. And even like it was, I mean, it was crazy, long days, and just, I think one day we had a pretzel for lunch or something.
One pretzel,
had,
right?
Peanut butter sandwich, and and just met, and then another gentleman I met named Pat. I mean, it ended up, we've already done a couple of deals since then. And he actually sent me a text today that he just got some type 1 photos back from PSA, and he had, some really nice stuff that ended up getting type 1. And he was, he just called me yesterday just to like share the good news and such. And he's again, a real straight shooter, like, good guy. And, and I'll say one other thing about like connection and stuff that, so I started working at Rotman's when I was 14 years old. And it turns out that the guy I worked for, his name was Jeff, and he and I reconnected like 3 years ago when I got back into the hobby. And he's kind of served as a sort of a mentor for me, because he's stayed in the hobby the entire time. He's been doing it for, probably 40 years now. And he's just been a resource in terms of, have a question, or even at the national, he let me borrow one of the big zippered Tyvek bags to lock up my case, because I mean, literally, didn't have any security types, just locking systems. And he ended up had a friend that was selling some cases, a retired gentleman, so I bought the display cases. So so I did give him a shout out too, and he'll be at the show this weekend. And this show is hard to get into, so there's as it goes, 100-person waiting list to get tables, because it's such a well attended show. And he offered to let me use some of his space if I didn't get in and such. So it's so you think about someone I met when I was 14 years old, and now I'm like, going to be 50 next year, and he's still like, a friend and a mentor of sorts. So it's wild how things happen like that.
Wow. You said his name was Pat. Shout out to Pat.
This one was Jeff. So Pat was
right,
from the national. Jeff Weisenberg's his name. He has his own little company called National Sports Card Investors, and he does auctions and does he'll be at the show selling such. So
all right, Jim, I was
Oh,
gonna
go ahead. Yeah.
jokingly interrupt and say you were allowed only 2 plugs, not 3. Okay, just
Oh,
2.
sorry. Sorry.
That was in our terms of our contract when we locked you up for this podcast experience. No,
Okay.
sorry, Jeff Weisenberg. Shout
Oh,
out,
yeah.
Jeff. If you hope you're listening to this, your friend is so fun to talk to. I can't believe we're already at the 45-minute mark. Whether I'm a guest or a host,
Yeah.
time just flies in these podcast recordings.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, you mentioned Holy Cross. So, and you are definitely of the age, like a little bit older than me when it comes to the early internet days with Boston. I mean, you and I have not talked about this, but surely you have read Bill Simmons.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, he graduated a few years ahead of me. I think I graduated in 96. I think he was like 91 or 93 or something from Holy Cross. So yeah, he was like, he had a little column in just in the Crusader. That was our the college newspaper. And yeah, then he went to ESPN, and now he's got the Ringer and the whole. I mean, it's
I
just
I loved his
crazy.
writing. I absolutely loved his writing. I thought he made me laugh so much, and then he stopped. I mean, I have 2 copies of the Book of Basketball. One's hardcover. I got him to sign it back when it came out, like in the mid 2000s, and then I got the soft cover that had the updated pyramid and all this, and even before that, just everything he wrote, I consumed it. I loved it so much, and then he stopped writing, and then he did things like this podcasts, and I just really miss that because
Yeah.
when it comes to content, we always think about audio or video content. We don't really think about writing as a content medium.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. I mean, when his blog, way back when I think it was called the Boston Sports Guy. Yeah, it was kind of, yeah, it's just funny how it's, how it took off. And yeah, no, but it's, so I guess you get to do what you like, and then you're good at it. Eventually you end up being successful usually. So.
Yes. I'll never know that. So no worries for me. Okay. So moving on. I know you had some questions here about, where do you find your cards and collectibles? I think, we talked about the local shows and the connections that you have. You did say that you wanted to share a story about buying a raw, and I got to know more about this, Jim. Like, this is, again, I don't know much vintage, but a 48 Bowman George Mikan rookie. You bought that raw at a local card show.
Yes. So this was maybe a couple months ago. So there's actually a really good local card show in like 45 minutes from here, Dedham, and I was set up there. As a dealer had a little extra space, so I set up and I just quickly went around the room, and I saw a fellow dealer talking to another dealer, showing him a stack of cards. And then he had in the stack, he actually had a 48 leaf Jackie Robinson, and then he had this 48 Bowman George Mikan rookie. And so the Mikan, the 2 of the corners on the Mikan were a little bit kind of worn, and almost like, in the corners were rough, but the rest of the card had really great registration. It was really bright. And he wanted $2,000 for the card, and I ended up negotiating down from there, and ended up buying the card, which I was maybe 95% sure that it wasn't a reprint based on some of the attributes of it. So because the corner was missing, you could see the pulp. So the type of paper they were using in the 40s and 50s had a very high, like a pulp content, so that you can almost see the fibers. So I took a risk, and he seemed like a legitimate dealer, and he had a lot of other vintage such things, and sent it to SGC, and luckily, a couple weeks later, it ended up being authentic. It didn't get a number grade because of the 2 corners were missing on it. But for an authentic Mikan, it's I think the last PSA authentic that had 4 pieces of tape around it on top of it. That I think did something like $4,000 back in May. So it's so I did okay, for the card, and I'll probably bring it to the show and see. I'm not going to give it away, but if someone else is interested, I'll potentially have it available and do a trade, or and then hopefully turn that into something else. Maybe buy another koozie card or something like that. So
Yeah, well, that type of card, I feel like, again, like, do with this what you will, but like, for you to be able to just share that you bought this card for $2,000, you took the chance, you took the risk, and it came back authentic. But again, if a PSA authentic sold for $4K, I mean, whatever the person wants to buy it for, they'll give you the offers. But I mean, that's open and honest. You bought it for $2K, you took a chance on it, you graded it. There's grading cost that comes with that as well. And for you to be able to, hopefully this turns out to be a good story and it goes to someone who really wants it. If they don't, I mean, you get to have it, and that's so awesome that you have that in your collection. You took a chance. Now, I joke a lot, but I did want to ask, like, when you bought this card, did you like try to smell it? Because I know these vintage cards definitely have, from what I've heard, people, if they're not slabbed, that they actually have a distinct smell.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. So that is actually one of the techniques. So I did. I did smell it. I did also have a loop, so like a magnifying, little magnifying device. And then what I did do is I knew another dealer there that had some common 48 Bowman cards, and then I had a couple of slabbed 48 Bowman, like non-big, moderate cards. So I was kind of comparing the coloration and the print and the registration under the loop. And then I asked a couple of dealers that I trusted. I did smell it. It smelled old, and just, but the one thing that made me nervous is that the colors were very bright. Like it has the color of the card has a blue background and like some red. And it was like, for the age of the card, it was kind of abnormally bright. And I sent a couple of pictures to a couple of friends as well that I trust in the hobby. And they, they were less certain because, and that was one of the things they said, wow, it seems really like bright, really crisp, almost like, makes you nervous. So, so I took a risk, and luckily, ended up, paid off, whether I keep it or not, because I couldn't, at this point, couldn't buy the same card on the open market for that. So
right, absolutely. So I love that you crowdsource that information. I think it's so important to have a wide network so that you can get a diverse range of opinions. And so, kudos for you for having built that network, so you could ask more than just one or two people. But for a big purchase like that, I mean, I feel like for like $100 card, if it's raw, I'll like talk to several people about it. So, again, great job.
Yeah, no, I was, no, I was nervous.
Yeah. So speaking about grading, I don't want to turn this into a grading. We're already at like the 50-minute mark. And again, the time is just flying by. But I did want to ask you, in your personal opinion, for vintage basketball, what is the biggest attribute, or what's the most important subgrade out of the 4 subgrades to you? Or if you want to rank all 4, like what's the most important down to the least important to you?
For me, I think this is just a personal preference. Like I and I think it goes into card appeal. Like I find that like centering, I personally value the highest. So I've like joked with people before that I'd rather like a really well centered like PSA 4 or 5 that has maybe like touched corners or maybe a little bit of surface imperfection, or but if it looks centered, to me, like in the presentation of the card, I feel like that comes across strongest to me. Then I would probably do the corners next, just because when we were growing up, it was all, I felt like everything was all about the corners, and does it have sharp corners? Yep. And then, probably like I guess the I don't know if registration would be kind of part of the surface. So I think that would be my my ranking, and I have not done a lot with Beckett in terms of like the subgrades and such, in terms of like the different categories and such. But I feel like for me, I can live with, you know, a little bit of surface imperfection, or, you know, a little bit of a touch corner. But if it's well centered and it has good clarity, I guess too is. I know that's not a technical thing that certain companies go grade with, but whereas I've seen like in the 61 Fleer, I've seen like grades of like a 6 that are like, to me, like woefully off-centered, and that people want, you know, pretty high money for, like Oscar Robertson rookie, for example, that's like off-center and it's a 6. And like, to me, I'd rather have a 4 with like softish corners that is like perfectly centered than a 6 that has, you know, perfect surface, perfect corners, perfect registration, but it's, you know, 80-20 or something, or 70-30.
Yeah.
Like, but that's, there are cards like that, and that's just, I think, a personal preference to me. It's more of like how I, you know, step back and look at the card.
Absolutely. So I have 2 offshoot questions from that, but I did want to say, as someone who literally did not own a slab this time last year, maybe not this time last year, but like this time plus 3 months of last year, edges, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, really, I remember corners as a kid. I remember, you know, centering being important, but, you know, a lot of the 90s basketball cards didn't have like borders. They just were borderless, you know, full photography through the entire card. But I totally get what you mean when it comes to the centering. And so I did want to ask you, and clarity, you know, fading is a 5th subgrade that actually, they're not a sponsor, but I will shout them out. C3 Grading, they have a 5th subgrade for not clarity or color, fading, which is really interesting. You know, it's interesting that they do that. But for centering, for you, what's more important, top, bottom, or left, right, or, you know, horizontal, not horizontal, vertical, but you know what I mean? Like, when we say 70-30, we're really kind of saying, like, you know, it's heavier on the left versus the right. It's heavier on the top versus the bottom. You know, of course, there's also 30-70 and things like that. But to you, again, no wrong answers here, just your personal preference. What is more important to you?
I think the side to side is more important. I feel like visually, if a card is centered side to side, I can live with the top to the bottom. And in my mind, I almost imagine that it was like the style of the card to have a high or a low top border. Whereas like when it's side to side, it just looks off to me. So I don't know. I think it's a perception or a personal preference, but like, you know, I think of like 61 Fleer where it has, you know, very distinct borders. And then if side to side is okay, I feel like the top to the bottom doesn't distract from the card as much, because I feel like when it's, especially there's certain cards like the Jerry West, Oscar Robinson, Wilt Chamberlain to some extent, but there's certain cards that, based on their position in the sheet, they tend to be more miscut than others. And to me, if it's really bad left to right, either direction, I feel like it just really detracts from the take home card appeal to me. So
Gotcha.
You know, like I just recently bought a 61 Jerry West card that's almost perfectly centered and pretty sharp corners. It has a print defect in the color in the bottom and the orange part. So, so it's a PSA 7. So if it didn't have a print defect, it would probably be an 8, and I couldn't afford it. So, so to me, it's almost like a blessing that it had a little dot. To me, that's like not a deal breaker, so to speak. Not that it was cheap at a 7, but it was manageable.
No, that's awesome. So when it comes to so the second offshoot question I had was, you've mentioned this term before, and I thought I knew what it was, but I think maybe I don't. When you were talking about surface, you said registration. So could you kind of explain to not even the listeners, just me, like when you say registration of a card, like what do you mean?
So as I understand it, it has to do with the clarity of the image that's used,
Mm.
and some of the vintage cards will have like different layers to them too. So they'll have, just for an example, like the 61 Fleer, they have the colored background, and then
Mhm.
in the printing process they superimposed another image of the player, and if it has good registration and clarity, that image is aligned with the color. So there are certain
Ah.
times when the card is printed where the image is just slightly off center, and you'll see like a white, almost like a white halo around the image of the person,
Yeah. Yeah, I've
and
seen
there's a
that.
little gap between the image and the color.
Mhm.
So I kind of refer to that as like the registration. I guess it's related to the clarity. Like if it's a little bit out of focus, like
Mhm.
sometimes during the printing process, there are cards that, and I think back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, the quality control obviously even now is not great, but it was even less so. So that, and even for the in the registration, like on this 57 tops basketball, so like the Bill Russell rookie card,
Mhm.
that card often has like print defects, little fish eyes, and then
Mm.
also they call it snow. It has
Yep.
most of the cards have a dark background,
Yep.
and it has like this white, almost like it looks like white imperfections. And uh, someone had told me it had to do with the sheets not being dry before they stacked them up after
Oh,
they came out of the
wow.
printer and such.
Yeah.
So to me, like there's an image of Bill Russell, and if it, like to me, if I think of registration and clarity, if the image is
Yeah.
clear and it doesn't have that white snow or print spots, then I
Mhm.
feel like it's. But of course, to get cards that from the 50s and 60s that have in 48 that have registration, centering, color, good corners, it's kind of a certainly a challenge. So
Yeah,
so
no, I
yeah, so
I gotta say, I had I don't know what year it is now, but maybe like a 72, 73. I don't have it in my hand. I have a tall boy of a 70, 71. It's hard to show because
yep.
I have a superimposed, but it's the Lou Alcindor Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with a yellow
Okay.
background. It's a tall boy. But
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
have I have a
that's a cool.
Kareem. Yeah, no, I love it. It's SGC4. The um the raw card I have of Kareem later in the 70s, which I can't find right now off the top of my head, but it has almost like a snowy snowflakes thing in the background where I like to call that the winter edition. Like like NBA hoops has like winter and like the sweaters and you know but now it makes sense. The printing it wasn't dried, and I thought I definitely knew it was a surface issue. I just didn't know that what the reason was. But that's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, that's what someone, and yeah, that's what they had said. So yeah, so it's yeah. Well,
So
I just before we go ahead, yeah.
well, I wanted to say we're at the 1 hour mark, and I know that in the notes here you thought maybe we could open up some wax, but I know you're like trying to find a Wi-Fi signal. I think you're literally holding the laptop in your hands, walking around the house. I don't think we're going to be able to open any packs. Would you agree? Is
No,
that
yeah,
correct?
that's okay. Yeah,
Okay,
that was like I think if everything went smoothly, maybe maybe some other time in the future
May-
or something
maybe
we can do that again as like a shorter guest spot or something.
right. Maybe we'll have to have you on, or you'll just have to win another giveaway at my 7,000 followers or whatever it is. I don't know if I'll be doing this again. I actually did a
Yeah,
real
yeah.
giveaway, and it got some actual real number of people, like literally hundreds of people who want this prototype Michael Jordan card. so, um,
Oh
I don't know if
wow.
you've entered in for that, but what's called that was done with my, again, not sponsors, but shout out to Arena Club. They gave me a credit to be able to buy a 1990s hoops prototype 00 Michael Jordan PSA 10, and we know that PSA 10 Jordans are really hard
Wow.
to come by. So bought it at the
Sure.
Chantilly show from a dealer, and literally a few hundred people have entered, and I'm like, I don't know what to like. I can't put all these names in a duck race. I'll have to figure out what to do. But for you to win this, wonderful. I do want to get you out on this one question. And it's a great question because you wrote it, and I already know what you're going to say. Only a snippet because you just kind of gave me a little teaser. But I want to get you out on the question that you wanted me to ask, which is, where is the strangest place you met to do a card or wax box deal?
Oh yes, yeah. So hopefully the signal lasts this last bit. So I had my craziest spot was at like on a Thursday night. I met a friend of mine at a Wendy's on Route 9 in Framingham and did like a cash deal that was oh god, it was a lot of money. It was into the thousands, and I
Four
bought
figures.
a Star
Okay.
Wars, 4 figures Star Wars series one wax box, and my kids like thought it was outrageous that I was like meeting this person that I kind of knew a little bit at the time but didn't know that well. And there was my wife was a big Motley Crue fan growing up, and there's a song like Dr. Feelgood, and in the song there's some line about rat-tailed Jimmy goes down to the hood and he's selling things out of the back of his car, the trunk of his car or something.
Yeah.
So there's a time that my family has been referring to me as rat-tailed Jimmy as if I'm dealing drugs or something out of the back of my vehicle. But it worked out. I got the box, and it was all good.
Jim, if you are at all like Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad, you would fit the bill. Like hey, I'm just I'm just a middle-aged dad, just a suburban, I got the goods in the back of the car right here. So thanks for sharing that. So can I ask you, Star Wars Series 1, what year is that from?
That's from 1977. So that was like the first wax packs when the movie first came out. Basically,
that's wild.
66 card set. So they like Luke Skywalker, they consider like his first rookie cards.
Is that the product hit or the chase is the Luke Skywalker? I'm sure there's no, like the cards from that time, there's no parallels, there's no case hits, but the Luke Skywalker and then I'm guessing the Darth Vader, those are the 1 and 2.
I think so. I know Luke is the one. I think like Han Solo has one, and I think Ben Kenobi. But I don't know if it ended, but there was a PSA 10 Luke Skywalker #1 from 77 that was I think it was an REA auction.
Yeah.
And the number was just crazy, like 100,000 or something, like 70,000, something like that.
Wow!
So, just because very low pop in a PSA 10. Yeah.
Plug number 4.
I don't know the exact number.
REA.
But yeah, you can.
Robert,
like that,
this episode was sponsored by Robert Edwards Auctions. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, I didn't. That wasn't intentional.
No, I know. I'm kidding. But that 100 grand or 70 grand for Luke Skywalker,
something like that. It was silly, and it had like a So that, and it's not bad odds because there's only 66 cards in the set, and I think there's 7 or 8 cards in the pack. So you have like if even a regular Luke, I think a 7 or an 8 might be $500 or something. So it's you probably hit it and be off center and bad corners.
I see. So I have to. I know I said I'm going to get you out on that question, but I have to ask you to follow up because I feel like some people listening really may be asking this, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. You did not rip that wax, did you?
No, that one, no, because that box, that was the biggest at that time, was the biggest expenditure I'd ever made on a single item in my career. So I was like sweating when I got home with that box because there's just so many people that are out there like reselling packs and such. So it had good provenance, and the guy bought 2 boxes, one of which had already been wrapped at I won't mention another company, but wrapped by one of the big wax.
Shout out BBCE. I'm sure. Another sponsor,
and,
amazingly.
Yeah. So, and it ended up, I ended up getting in touch with another person, this gentleman, Kurt, who does a lot of vintage wax, and he does his own company now too, but I ended up selling it to him, because I had this panic of like the market crashing, like in the weeks following me buying this box. So I basically sold it to him as is. He invested, he evaluated it. He confirmed that it was legit. And then I made, some money, but I didn't make it as much as if I had wrapped it and tried to sell it on my own. I just kind of wanted to, I guess that was my version of a relatively quick flip, but I was given the money involved. I was in I think I barely slept that night because I was visioning like if I somehow they were rewrapped, I would have, a pile of garbage for, a 4-figure investment. So it's, and it's, there are people out there doing it. So it's, but anyhow, so I got lucky, and turns out, I became good friends with the guy I bought it from and stuff. So it's
nice.
One of those small world.
And you said his name was Kurt, right?
Yeah, who I sold it to. Yeah, Kurt.
Well,
Kurt
hey,
He's
great. This episode is now sponsored by Kurt's Card Care, where you can get all your card care needs. And then, of course, I have to shout out Mr. Minty, just to make it even. Okay, so thank you so much for this wonderful podcast episode recording. It's funny. You just mentioned the Star Wars Series 1, and in my notes where you helped me talk about what you wanted to talk about today, you were actually going to rip one of the 77, and now I see it, 1977 Star Wars Series 1 pack. You have a pack. We're not going to open it today because you're literally like old school. It's almost, this is like the ultra modern version of trying to move the rabbit ears of the antenna to find the right signal on your TV, right? Your cathode ray tube television, right? Back when we were watching television, right? So kudos to you for not dropping the laptop.
That's funny.
But you were going to rip open.
It's all good.
Yeah. So how much does one pack go for?
So this pack was a $200 pack. So basically I bought it from a gentleman on a Facebook group that's like a vintage wax group that he bought a box, and then he ended up selling the packs out of the box.
Wow.
And,
you were going to rip open a $200 pack. Thank you for
basically.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, so this is like how I got started in the hobby. When I was like 15, 16, I would buy 85 Topps baseball or 86 Don Ross, looking for Conseco rookies and such.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's kind of like, it's like an experience, and it's kind of like, if I go to a show and I make $500 or $600 or whatever, if I make some money, and then I kind of like splurge. So I got this pack. So it's been sitting for 6 months probably. So I was kind of like, oh, this would be an opportunity, kind of like fun, rather than just do it by myself. But
Jim,
maybe we'll try
in the future. I got to say this. When I saw, you literally can't, because you have your hands literally full.
Because then
when I read your notes, when I saw Star Wars 77 Series 1 pack, I literally thought this was like junk wax. I was like, oh, he's going to open up like a $2 pack of cards. I'm like, okay, well, if he wants to, sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, whatever he's into, he won the giveaway. But you were going to open up a $200 pack of cards. That's amazing. Thank you so much for even having that faith in this.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, it's so the last one we did, my buddy Josh and I opened one at the Wilmington show in April. And so this is funny. So we bought a pack. A friend of mine sold it to me cheap. He gave it to me, I think, for like $100. And we ripped it. We didn't get any big names, but he got a card that was really clean. And PSA had a program a couple months back where you could do any Star Wars card for $15.
Oh, wow.
He would grade it. So he ended up sending in a common that looked really clean. And he got a 9, and he sold the PSA 9 common for like $190 because people, these fancy rich set builders want,
Yeah.
you know, a whole set of PSA 8, 9, 10 or
Mhm.
whatever. So it was kind of funny. So I just gave it to him because he helped me at the show. He helped me set up and break down my table and, you know, pack up my
That's
stuff.
awesome.
So it was, again, like a win-win. We had fun. We were like little kids opening this
That's
pack
awesome.
of like a card. So it's kind of that's kind of the idea behind it there. So.
I love it. I see you smiling. I see so much joy. I see the happiness, and that's what it's about. Just having fun. Again, you're building a great network up there. I would love to come to Worcester and check things out. Jim, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I had no clue what to expect, and I think you just exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I had fun here, even though I'm standing here, and I hope it translates okay, and it's not too jumpy when it gets recorded. But I appreciate your time and look forward to perusing it, and we'll definitely connect. I want to try to hit that Chantilly show at some point in the future, so we'll definitely, if I make it down that way, we'll definitely connect, grab a bite or something.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jim. Have a good evening.
Okay, have a great night. Thanks again for your time. Okay, peace out.